If I were to write a Broadway show about three women that we are going to discuss today, it would be one word, and the title would be Indomitable. Now, the reason for this title is that it was impossible for these three women to be subdued or defeated until their death. That's what it means to be indomitable, just FYI. The indomitable spirit of these three women in church history is so important, not only to the history of the church, but to all of us. And the impressive connection these three women have to each other, which may surprise you, will have you loving their stories even more. Welcome to the fourth episode of Unnamed Women of the Doctrine and Covenants. This is a special bonus series from the Sunday on Monday podcast. Now, if you're wondering, what is Sunday on Monday? Well, it's a Deseret Bookshelf Plus original podcast brought to you by LDS Living, where we take the Come Follow Me lesson for the week and we really dig into the scriptures together. If you want to know more about us, click on the link in the description or go to ldsliving.com/Sunday on Monday for a free 7-day trial of Deseret Bookshelf Plus, which is like Audible, and so you get the Deseret Book Library plus this awesome podcast. Now, my favorite thing about the Sunday on Monday podcast is each week I get to invite two friends to join me and discuss the scriptures and real-life application. For this bonus series, I am thrilled to introduce you to my co-host, Dr. Jenny Reeder. Hello, Jenny.
Oh, hey, Tammy. I'm so excited to be here with you today. So excited.
Okay, so for those of you who don't know this, Jenny Reeder, she has her PhD in history and women's studies, and she works for the church history department. This is a lady, like, she's indomitable. There's a good word to describe you too, Jenny. You don't give up.
Oh, no, I don't. I stayed up so late last night preparing for this, and I'm so excited to be here.
Well, Jenny gave me a list of the women in church history that we have to study. Normally, we only do 6 episodes of Unnamed Women, but the list was so long that we're like, we can't cut it short. We can't just do 6. I think we're doing 9. But I love the list because this is my favorite quote from Jenny Reeder. We wouldn't have church history if we didn't have the women.
It is so true. They moved so many of these things forward, and I don't think they get all the credit they deserve. So that's why we're here.
Yay! Okay, so the women that we're going to talk about today, I'm going to say their names, and then I'm going to let Jenny tell us their stories. We have Jerusha Smith, Mary Fielding Smith, and Mercy Fielding Thompson Smith. Now, they do all have a common last name, so that gives you some hint to how they're related. But this blew my mind learning all of their stories. So, Jenny, start out. Tell us a little bit about Jerusha Smith.
You know, Jerusha Smith, I didn't know very much about her, and I actually need to learn more about her with my assignment at work on the historic sites. And I am so excited to learn more about her. She was born in 1805 in Connecticut, and she was the youngest of 5 children. They moved to New York, where she lived with her brother Seth and his wife Rachel in Manchester. And she heard about Joseph Smith then and Hiram Smith. And Lucy Mack Smith said she was one of the most excellent of women, which is beautiful that your mother-in-law would say that about you.
Oh, I like that. Oh, wait, you said mother-in-law. What does that mean?
She married Hiram Smith.
Okay, that's so cool. Keep going.
Okay, so this is something I just learned last night. Hiram Smith had a wooden box that had belonged to their older brother, Alvin Smith. And when Joseph and Emma retrieved the plates from Moroni, Joseph asked him if he could borrow it to store the plates in. So at the time when he came to get it, Jerusha was at home. She was in bed because she just had a baby, and her sisters were visiting, and they were like, why is he so weird? And she's like, oh, it's not a big deal. It's nothing. Don't worry. He gets like that when he's excited.
Oh, that's funny.
Right?
Why are they so weird? Yeah.
But she couldn't tell them what was going on or what was in the box or what they needed the box for.
How many children did Jerusha and Hiram have?
Jerusha and Hiram had 6 children. Sorry.
Okay.
But Jerusha was baptized on June 9th, 1830 by David Whitmer in Seneca Lake, New York. After her baptism, the family with 2 children moved to Colesville, New York, which is where the Knights were from. And it was another branch of the church. And then the next year they moved to Kirtland, and they were among the first of the saints to travel there, which is awesome.
Oh, that's so cool.
So in Kirtland, she had 4 more children, John Smith, Hiram Smith, Jerusha Smith, and Sarah Smith. And 5 of her children outlived her. 1 died young, which is kind of cool when you think about it. Many of them had higher mortality death rates.
Yeah.
But her one son, Hiram, was born in Nauvoo in 1834, and he only lived to be 7.
Hmm.
So anyway, they moved to Missouri before they moved to Missouri, Hiram went on a mission to Far West, but Jerusha was pregnant with her last child and she hadn't been feeling well. And he received a letter about a month after she had passed away. She had delivered a baby and didn't recover. She had been really sick. So Don Carlos Smith, who is Hiram's brother, wrote Hiram and said, I called the family together. Jerusha told the children to tell their father that the Lord had taken their mother and left them for you to take care of. And then he took care of them until Hiram returned. So Hiram actually left Missouri 2 weeks after he arrived. And he came back to Kirtland to take care of his children. Joseph Smith arrived a few days after Hiram did and told him it was the Lord's will that he should marry Mary Fielding Smith, the English convert from Canada.
Oh.
So 3 weeks after his return from Missouri, they got married on December 24th, 1837. Christmas Eve. Yeah.
Christmas Eve wedding.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
my
Joseph
goodness.
performed the wedding for them. 3 weeks after he came back from Missouri, Hiram said, it was not because I had less love or regard for Jerusha that I married so soon, but it was for the sake of my children.
Wow. Okay. How much do I love Mary Fielding Smith then? Because she was like a stepmom, for lack of a better word. She married a man with 5 children?
Mm-hmm.
Or had the 7-year-old already died?
Nope, the 7-year-old. So it was 6 children at the time.
Oh my goodness.
And that's even more ironic. We'll talk more about that in a minute.
Okay. So Jerusha Smith, we love you. May you rest in peace. Thank you. She married Hiram. That was Hiram's first wife.
Mm-hmm.
She would birth 6 children.
7 children.
7 children.
One died young. The other died at age 8.
Okay. And then she dies
about 2 weeks after she gave birth to Sarah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow, that breaks my heart. And how sad for Hiram to be grieving a wife.
I know. I know.
Like, I guess I didn't realize that was going on in his life, his own personal life, while he's also trying to support his brother who's starting a church and following God. And wow, that just kind of blows my mind. I had no idea of his state.
And I think it was also sad. I read somewhere that Jerusha was best friends with Emma. So I think that must have been hard for Emma too.
Wow, absolutely. Okay, so tell me about Mary Fielding Smith. Like, where's she from and how did Joseph know for her to marry Hiram?
Mary Fielding Smith and her sister Mercy Fielding Thompson and her brother Joseph Fielding were all from England. And they had a very devout mother, Rachel, who died in 1828. And she actually, before she died, she told Mary Fielding, never become a stepmother. Because she was also, her mother was also a stepmother. Her husband was a widower, John Fielding, was a widower with 3 children. And so Rachel had to care for all of that. And it was so hard to blend the families.
Really?
Yeah.
Can't imagine.
I know.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I'm dying. These women know my heart. I love them so much more now.
I know, right? So
they didn't have therapists back then. They didn't have blended family therapists. Like,
no,
they just had to figure it out.
Huge. I know. My mom has remarried, so I know what that's like. Blending family cultures. Whew.
Okay. Keep going.
Okay. So Mary was older than Mercy, but Mercy and Joseph immigrated to Canada before Mary did. And interestingly, she had 2 marriage proposals before she left. But one she wouldn't marry because she didn't want to be a stepmother. And she came to Canada because Mercy had found her a position to teach school there in Toronto. So she and her brother and her sister studied religion, became very good friends with John and Leonora Cannon Taylor. And they were all baptized in May of 1836.
Like John Taylor, we're talking.
Yes.
The prophet John Taylor.
Yes.
That would be eventually. Okay, keep
These
going.
people are tight.
Yeah, this is cool.
They moved to Kirtland, Ohio in 1837. And this is one of my favorite things about, well, there's so many things about Mary. So Mercy, we'll talk more about this, but she got married to a man named Robert Blatchel Thompson, and they were sent on a mission back to Canada. Joseph Fielding had been sent on a mission back to England. So Mary is all by her lonesome in Kirtland, and she's like 36 years old, single. And she wrote this letter to Mercy in Canada, and she was so uncertain at the beginning of the letter how she would find more work. She was teaching one school term, and she didn't know what she was going to do when that ended the next day as she was writing the letter. But she said, I feel my mind pretty much at rest on that subject. I've called upon the Lord for direction and trust he will open my way. So she continued writing, and I think she did this often. She, like over a period of a week or something, she wrote this letter and she would add in things and she would turn the letter. Like, I don't know if you've seen those old letters where people use every inch. Yeah, writing on top of each other.
They have one of those at Liberty Jail.
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. So at the end of the letter, she said, since I commenced this letter, a kind sister has prospered by going to stay for a while with her to take charge of 2 or 3 children who have been in my school. They propose giving something besides my board, and I think this will suit me better than public school if it is but little. So by the end of her letter, her trust in the Lord had totally come through for her.
Wow.
Right?
Which she's going to need.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So she writes another letter to Mercy later about worshiping in the Kirtland Temple, and it's one of the most beautiful accounts. All the charismatic gifts and speaking in tongues and light and all the things that happened. She said, a bright light shone across the house and rested upon some of the congregation. What I felt that day seemed to outweigh all the affliction and distress of mind I have suffered since I came here. So I really think she's kind of a study of really hard things, but really rich blessings. They go together for her. So she does marry Hiram, and they move to far west Missouri in May of 1838. And that's where she had her first son. So she has those 6 children. And then Joseph Fielding Smith is born, her son, in far west in November of 1838.
I didn't realize she had named her son after her brother. I think that's pretty neat.
Okay, that's one of the things I love. These siblings were so tight.
Yeah.
They always looked out for each other.
So she names her son Joseph Fielding Smith, who will become the prophet that we know as Joseph F. Smith. And Joseph F. Smith will then have a son by the name of Joseph Fielding Smith, who is the following prophet, Joseph Fielding Smith.
Yes,
So
right?
cool. Okay, yes, keep going.
Okay, so while they're in Far West, Mercy, her sister, is living with her because her husband is sort of in hiding while fighting the Missourians. And Mary became very ill. So Mercy cared for her for 4 months. And Mercy had just barely had her own daughter. And in February of 1839, Hiram was in Liberty Jail. Hiram and Mary have a very hard time communicating. Their letters just kind of cross each other, and they're not able to respond to the latest, and she's sick and he's depressed. And there's this whole exchange where we have this beautiful letter from Mary to Hiram in Liberty Jail. And she says, you need to settle down, basically, because he thinks she's mad at him and doesn't want to be with him. And she said, should I forsake a friend and bosom friend in the time of adversity and affliction, when all the sympathy and affection I am capable of feeling is called to soothe and comfort as far as possible under such circumstances as you are placed in? No! Reason, religion, and honor, and every feeling of my heart forbids such a thought to enter there. And she goes on to say, I assure you, do not worry about my anxious thoughts or sleepless nights. It has been my desire and aim to do in your absence, both by them and for them, as in your presence, or even more, knowing your great carefulness and concern for your general welfare. If I should again be permitted to enjoy your society, she was worried that he was going to die, or she was going to die. I hope to prove to you that I am a never failing friend. I now feel to long to see you. And she says, I subscribe myself your most affectionate and faithful friend and companion in tribulation.
Oh, how sweet. Now I'm thinking, I think that's the letter on display in Liberty Jail that's written. I think it's
all
written
over.
long and then it turns over and it's written the other way. Like it's written hot dog way and then hamburger way.
Right.
It's the only way I can think of it. But for anyone listening who's like, oh, I'd love to go to these sites, I just got back and let me tell you this. If you fly into Kansas City, Missouri, in about 1 day's time, you can see the church history sites. And actually 2 days' time. So flying to Kansas City, which is next to Independence, that's where you're going to see the visitor center that our church has, as well as the Reorganized Church or the Church of Christ. And then there's also another cute little church on the corner where you see the temple lot that they own, which I love. Go take the tour of that place. Then you can drive to Liberty Jail, which is only about an hour away. And you can see that cool site. And then the next day, you can drive to Adamon-Diamond, which is about an hour and a half away from Independence. And then if you want to go to Nauvoo, you're going to book a hotel in Nauvoo because it's a 4-hour drive from Kansas City. So then go and see Nauvoo. I didn't realize where all those locations were. And I think sometimes when people want to come and see the sites, they think they can do it all in a week because you think that, Independence and Nauvoo and Palmyra are all close to each other. And they're not.
Right.
But you can hit those Kansas City, Missouri sites in about a week. Well, 3 days, 3 or 4 days. So go do it. I highly recommend it. But I think that letter is in the casing because I remember seeing
good. I
a
love
letter
that.
written that way. Oh, how sweet.
I do have to add one more thing. She wrote at the end, I believe all our afflictions will work together for our good, although they are not joyous while passing through them. Yours in affection in the fullest sense of the word.
Wow.
Hiram then requests that Mary come to visit him. Now she's still really sick. And so Mercy, her sister, takes her. Joseph F. Smith is 11 years old and her daughter, Mary, is 8 months old in a wagon bed. And it's so cold. And she had to nurse both the babies because Mary was so sick.
Now, I think that is so sweet that her sister nursed.
I know. It really is.
Mm-hmm. That's sweet.
It really is. So then later, Mary writes to her brother Joseph, who's on a mission in England, about this whole experience. And this, I think, is so beautiful. She said to him, I have, to be sure, been called to drink deep of the bitter cup. But you know, my beloved brother, this makes the sweet sweeter.
Oh, how sweet. Jenny, I love that you found these letters.
She's amazing. There are more letters and she's amazing. Mm-hmm. Really, truly amazing.
Mary Fielding Smith, we love you. We love you.
Yeah.
Because you raised 6 kids and then you had, how many did she and Hiram have together?
She had 2, Joseph Fielding and then Martha Ann Smith. Martha was named for her sister, Mary's sister.
7 kids she's raising.
Yeah. So Mary joins the Nauvoo Relief Society on March 24th, 1842. And she says this on the same day that it's the second meeting of the Nauvoo Relief Society. The minutes say this: Mrs. Mary Smith then rose and said the institution had her hearty concurrence, that nothing was more laudable than feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, etc., that she desired to aid in accomplished objects so generous.
Wow. Well, because then there's a story. So her sister Mercy, it reminds me of that scripture that talks about Nephi and his brother Lehi in Helaman,
Yes.
where it says he was no whit behind him. Like they both were so awesome and incredible together. And it makes me think of these two, Mercy and Mary. So we have Mary and then her sister Mercy, because there's a story that I read about Mercy where at the same time that you just talked about in the Relief Society, when they're trying to build the Nauvoo temple, and Mercy wakes up. She has a dream, actually. So they were trying to figure out how to earn money to build the Nauvoo temple.
Right. Hiram was so worried about the construction, and that was taking up all of his time and energy.
So Mercy hears these words enter into her mind, which is this: try to get the sisters to subscribe 1 cent per week for the purpose of buying glass and nails. That's it, 1 cent per week. She said Hiram was much pleased with the revelation and did everything he could to push it forward by urging public audiences to subscribe as Mercy had requested. With Hiram's help, she and Mary raised over $1,000, which was no small sum in those days, for the cause. I just love how she wakes up with this thought, 1 cent per week. And then Hiram's like, let's do it. So keep going.
when Joseph and Hiram came to visit Mary right before they drove to Carthage, and she was so sad. She had a 3-year-old Martha Ann Smith who had the measles and was sick. And Joseph said to Mary, Sister Mary, don't feel bad. The Lord will take care of you and he will deliver us, but I do not know how. And little Martha also has a memory of when her father was in Carthage and her mother was pacing the floors and reading the Bible and praying for them. And news came in the morning of her husband Hiram's death. And she said, my poor mother stepped back calmly, exclaiming, it cannot be. He gave answer, yes, it is true. And she fell back against the cupboard, and they sat her in a chair.
Oh.
So it was devastating to all of them. And Martha said, oh, how I loved my mother. I fear to displease her. I would rather burn my hand than vex my mother, which is so sweet.
So she's a widow.
She is.
Kids.
She is. And she is sealed or married to Heber C. Kimball as a plural wife in 1844. She migrates to Salt Lake Valley in 1848. But she and Mercy and Joseph were among the last to leave Nauvoo in September of 1846.
Oh my gosh, we have to tell a story about how they said that Mary couldn't go with them to Salt Lake. Tell that story.
Okay, so first of all, Joseph Fielding Smith was 8 years old when they left, and he drove a wagon all by himself 300 miles across Iowa. And they arrived in winter quarters late in 1846, and Mary and Joseph Fielding had gone back to St. Louis to get supplies. And Joseph Fielding Smith writes about how one morning their oxen were gone and they were tramping all through the grass. And then he happened to see his mother kneeling in prayer. And he said, I halted for a moment and then drew gently near enough to hear her pleading with the Lord not to suffer us to be left in this helpless condition, but to lead us to recover our lost team, that we might continue our travels in safety. And when she got up from her prayer, she saw him, and the first thing he saw was this beautiful smile, which gave him hope. And a few minutes later, his uncle, Joseph Fielding, came to the camp and said, well, Mary, the cattle are gone. And Mary said, never mind. Your breakfast has been waiting for hours. And now, while you and Joseph are eating, I will take a walk and see if I can find the cattle. And Uncle Joseph Fielding held up his hands in astonishment. And she started down towards the river. As she was walking down there, a man in charge of the herd of beef cattle rode up from the opposite side of the creek and called out, hey, ma'am, I saw your oxen over in that direction about daybreak, pointing in the opposite direction from which Mother was going.
Mm-hmm.
And she just kept going, didn't even turn her head to look at them, continued straight down to the little stream of water till she was almost on the bank. And then she beckoned back to Joseph Fielding Smith and Joseph Fielding. And Joseph Fielding Smith says this, like John, who outran the other disciple to the sepulchre, I outran my uncle and came first to the spot where my mother stood. There I saw our oxen fastened to a clump of willows, perfectly concealed from view. And then later he said it was one of the most first practical and positive demonstrations of the efficacy of prayer I had ever witnessed. It made an indelible impression upon my mind and has been a source of comfort, assurance, and guidance to me throughout all my life.
Wow.
Isn't that great?
Love, love, love.
So here's the part that you just asked about. When they're in winter quarters preparing to go to Salt Lake. Now, Mercy has left the year before. And Mary and Joseph, her brother, are preparing to go. And she just has so much that she's trying to, all those kids, all the people. Joseph Fielding has a couple of wives by this time. And she asked the company captain, Cornelius Lott, to help her. And he said, you need to turn around. You are just going to be a burden to this company. And she said, well, I will beat you to the valley and ask for no help.
Oh,
so we have this story. She writes Mercy again, who's in Salt Lake, and it describes the situation and how tough it is. and they don't have food. And she always is saying, may the good Lord remember mercy in this respect. How much do I see and feel our dependence upon him? May the Lord rest upon us and prosper us until we meet, is the prayer of your affectionate sister. But it's in Wyoming, and many people probably heard this story, that one of her ox became sick. And the captain, our good friend, Mr. Lot, said, it's going to die. Just unyoke it and leave it. I told you you would be a burden to this company. Well, that is not going to stop Mary. She goes to her wagon, gets a little bottle of consecrated oil, and with the assistance of her brother, used it. And then old Buck jumped to his feet, and we went on our way rejoicing.
Oh, my word.
And then later on, the captain had a similar problem, and she offered to help, but he declined. He did not want her help.
So then, Mary.
I know, right as they're coming into the valley, her sister Mercy had sent a man to come help them the very last little bit. And her oxen were lost again, and the captain was not willing to wait. So they left her behind, and they left. She's expecting to spend the night there, but after the company left, there was a rainstorm, and it drove the cattle back to camp. So they didn't stop. They just went on, and they arrived in Salt Lake Valley at the fort at 11 p.m. And she bathed, and the next day she went to a meeting, and on their way home, she met the captain, tired and dirty, just entering into the fort.
Oh, Mary, good job.
I know.
So cool.
Okay, one more story about Mary, okay?
Yes.
She had been sealed for time to Heber C. Kimball, but he had a lot of wives and did not have time or energy or money to take care of all of them. So she and Joseph Fielding, her brother, were given some farmland in Mill Creek outside of Salt Lake City. And she lived there. It was really hard. She worked so hard. She had a large family. And Joseph Fielding Smith, her son, said one spring that they opened up their potato pits, and she had her boys get a load of the best potatoes to take to the tithing office. And when they drove up, one of the clerks came out and said, why, Widow Smith, it's a shame that you should have to pay tithing. And he said, you don't have to pay tithing. And Mary turned to him and said, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. Would you deny me a blessing if I did not pay my tithing? Not only because it is the law of God, but because I expect a blessing by doing it. So this is how I'm going to take care of my family.
Oh, my word. She paid her tithing even in her poverty.
Right. So she goes into Salt Lake City on September 21st from her farm in Mill Creek for a meeting. And she gets really sick and stops at Heber C. Kimball's house and is there for like 8 weeks. She couldn't move. And he gave her a blessing, and she died.
Oh.
And it was so sad. And she's buried in the Salt Lake Cemetery. 1852. Wow. I think she was 51 years old.
Wow. Can we go to her? Let's go to her grave. Will you take me to the Salt Lake Cemetery and show me some graves? There's a tour you should do.
I know, right? I've done it before.
I would do a Jenny Reeder.
Oh my gosh.
Tour
just as long as I don't slip on the snow on Bathsheba Smith's grave and break my wrist. Oh, wait, that already happened.
Based on a true story.
Based on a true story.
We'll go in the summertime. Oh my gosh, that's so crazy. Okay, right? Okay, so now we know Jerusha, second wife Mary, who we love, stepmom to many children, raised those kids, brought them across all the way to Salt Lake, mother of Joseph Fielding Smith, the prophet. So now tell us about her sister Mercy, because what does Mercy have to do? Because we said at the very beginning, all three of these women have a very unique connection. What's the connection? What's Mercy's connection now?
So Mercy immigrated to Canada with her older brother, Joseph Fielding, in 1832. They had lost their family home, and he had an opportunity to care for a gentleman's farm outside of Toronto. But soon after they got there, the gentleman died and they had to work. Anyway, he was able to buy a farm and build a home. And then Mary joined them 2 years later. They were baptized by Parley P. Pratt on May 21st, 1836. They moved to Kirtland, Ohio, and Mercy married Robert Blatchel Thompson. He was also an immigrant from England and a Methodist and had been baptized by Parley P. Pratt in May of 1836. So they had a connection. So they are called immediately on a mission back to Canada. And then when they were done with that, and we have all those beautiful letters from her sister Mary in Kirtland. And so we have a great record of what's going on with her. So they moved to Far West. She has a baby and a baby girl, Mary Jane Thompson. And she takes her sister and the two babies to Liberty Jail in February of 1839. And she said, the circumstances I always reflect upon with peculiar pleasure, notwithstanding the extreme anxiety I endured from having the care of my sick sister and the two babes. The remembrance of having had the honor of spending a night in prison in company with the prophet and patriarch produces a feeling I cannot express.
Wow.
So they eventually moved to Nauvoo. Her husband, Robert, becomes a clerk or a secretary to Joseph Smith, who loves him so much. And he dies. Robert dies from a severe lung infection, which could have been malaria or tuberculosis.
So Mercy's a widow.
She's a widow.
A young widow?
A very young widow. She was born in 1807.
Mm-hmm.
And her husband dies in 1841.
Oh,
and they were married just 3 years.
Oh, how sad. So she was like 33 years old as a widow.
Mm-hmm.
She'd only been, wow, married 3 years with one little girl.
I know.
Okay,
so Mary and Mercy both joined the Nauvoo Relief Society together at the second meeting on March 24th, 1842. In 1843, in August, Joseph came to her and told Mercy that he didn't want her to be so lonely. And then he said that he requested Hiram to be sealed to her for time. And Hiram told this to Mary, his wife, who told her sister Mercy, and she was kind of shocked by this proposal. But then Joseph told her that her husband, Robert, who had died, came to him several times and asked him to have Mercy marry Hiram so that she would be taken care of, which I think is so sweet. Mm-hmm. So at the same time that she was sealed to Hiram with her sister, Mary, she became the first woman to be sealed to her dead husband for eternity at the same time.
Oh, now that's neat.
Right?
Wow, wow, I did not realize that.
Yeah.
Okay. She loved him so much. Wow. Okay.
So, Joseph Smith told Mercy, I feel like we have to use last names and first names because they're all, that the endowments that she would receive, the temple endowment, would bring her out of darkness and into marvelous light. So she received her endowment and initiatory from Emma Smith. And then she was one of the first women to serve when the Nauvoo temple was completed. Brigham Young asked her to live in the temple with her little girl to assist the women's work. And wow. She spent 6 weeks almost every day working day and night as thousands received their endowments before leaving Nauvoo.
I heard that they were doing it like 24 hours too.
Yeah.
Like in the temple, just working nonstop for people to receive their endowment. That's pretty neat. So she was part of that group. She was living in the temple. I did not realize that.
Isn't that great?
Oh, thank you, Mercy.
Right. And even when she came to Salt Lake City, she began working in the endowment house as soon as that was available. It was said that she sought all the means in her power to promote temple work for women. I love it. So she was a zealous devotee of temple work. She spent 50 years of her life working in the temple.
Wow.
So she lived in the 16th ward of Salt Lake City. She was the secretary of the Relief Society when they started in the 1850s. And then when it was reorganized, she was the treasurer for like 16 years of that Relief Society. And after her sister died, Mercy raised Mary's daughter, Martha Ann, and took good care of them. I mean, they were all so tight.
Yeah.
And then her daughter, Mary Jane, got married, and her husband died early, so she and her son came and lived with them too.
Wow. Do we know anything of Mercy when it came to being sealed to Hiram for time? Like, was that difficult for her? Because her sister's married to him, and then when her husband dies, she's going to be sealed to Hiram, but then not for very long because then Hiram will die.
Right.
Is there anything written about that decision for Mercy?
She said this. She said, everything within me rose in opposition to such a step. But when your father called and explained the subject to me, I dared not refuse to obey the counsel, lest peradventure I should be found fighting against God. So she did it. She just had faith and did it.
Oh my goodness. So these three women were all married to Hiram Smith.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's a fun fact for people to know.
Mm-hmm.
Jerusha, Mary, and Mercy. And then
Mercy,
he would die.
Right. Mercy never took the name Smith. She always was Mercy Fielding Thompson.
Oh, wow. You know what? I'm just having this thought. I think it's so fascinating because we often talk about the female side of polygamy and what the women were going through and what they experienced. I'd love to hear from the men because now I'm just realizing all these men that married women and that took care of these women in absolute poverty, but they took on the responsibility. It would have been so easy for them to be like, I can't afford one more woman. There's no way.
Yeah.
I would love to know what it was like for them to pray and receive the revelation too. Someone should write that.
Well, you know, Hiram, when he received this instruction from Joseph, went and built another room on his house so that Mercy would be comfortable there.
Oh, yeah, I think that's pretty amazing. Oh my goodness. So how long did Mercy live? Where did she end up? In Utah?
Mercy, yeah, she was in Utah. She died in 1893 at the age of 86. So she outlives all of her siblings.
Wow.
And that's 5 months after the dedication of the Salt Lake Temple. And she's buried right next to her sister, Mary Fielding Smith, in the Salt Lake City Cemetery.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Isn't that great? I love that.
Okay, now for sure I want to go on a tour.
Okay, let's
plan
do
that.
it.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so tell me, Jenny, as you were studying about these three women, what did you learn or what did you appreciate about, preparing for all of this? As a historian, sum it up for me.
I'm so glad you asked me this because I spent a lot of time preparing, and as I read and researched and took notes, I felt such pride. And I don't know if that's the right word or not, but such excitement to be a part of their lives. I loved the connection that they had, the three of them. And I can only imagine when Mercy dies, going to heaven and seeing her sister Mary, her husband Robert, her other husband Hiram, and Jerusha. I don't know if she knew Jerusha because she was sent on a mission to Canada, but I can only imagine the happy reunion that all of these people had.
I agree. And I'd like to think it would have been happy with Mary and Jerusha. I'm counting on that when I meet Michelle, my husband's wife who passed away, because that was what surprised me. I guess I just didn't really realize the blended family situations going on at this time. And it is hard now, and we have resources, and how hard it must have been then. And the grieving hearts, I just didn't really put into play that Hiram was grieving through all of this.
Oh, totally.
And
totally.
How sad, because you would have been, I can't imagine, the human in him would have been like, God, how much more difficult? Like, can't you throw me a bone? Like,
right.
At least get me out of jail so I can see my family again,
Right. Well, and I think it's interesting that in Nauvoo, Jerusha and Hiram's son, Hiram Smith, who was born in 1834, died in 1841. So he died 3 years after his mother died. Oh. And his stepmother, Mary Fielding Smith, took care of him and was with him and mourned his passing as well.
Wow. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing their stories. I am so appreciative that you even brought their names up because I had not considered them.
Right.
And you had them in one line. And I remember saying, why are we doing all three women at the same time? And when you said, oh, they were all married to Hiram, I was like, what? Yes. Done and done. This
That's
was
right.
Women, we love you. Thank you to the three of you who carried on. Indomitable. Like they just
Yep.
wouldn't quit. They carried on. And
hmm
women are amazing to just
Yeah.
step in and raise someone's children.
But not only that, but you're amazing too, Tammy, for
Well,
stepping in and raising someone's children.
it's
The thing,
hard.
it is hard, but the thing that I love is that we're all in this together and
Yeah.
they are our ladies. This is part of our host. I love them.
That's one of my favorite things you say is for everyone listening, just so you know, Jenny often says she feels like the church history women are her host that help her and buoy her up. And I believe it every time I'm with Jenny because she tells their stories. And so I think we should, when we know their stories, we should tell their stories and make sure that their part of church history is told because again, there would be no church history if there weren't women that carried
That's
on.
true.
It would have altered everything. Can you imagine if Mary had said, we're not leaving, we're going to stay in Nauvoo?
Yeah. Everything. I mean,
Wow.
Emma stayed in Nauvoo.
She
I
did.
think she had different reasons, but
Absolutely. Which I love. I love your reason. For anyone who hasn't heard, Jenny, give us your reason because it's my favorite thing about her blessing in section 25.
So in section 25, a revelation that was given to her in 1830, the Lord told Emma to go with Joseph at his going. And so she did. She followed him to Fayette, New York, and then to Kirtland, Ohio, and then to Far West, Missouri, and then to Nauvoo. And he was killed while they were living in Nauvoo. She finally had a home of her own and her children, and she was pregnant with her last child when he was killed. And I think she chose to stay with him and his body. So she went with him at the time of his going, and she stayed with him at the time of his staying. I love that about her.
I do too. And I love how you sum that up so perfectly. Like it stayed with me forever. So thank you. Thanks for paying the price to know the stories of these women. I love you, friend.
I love you, and I love these women.
Yes. And I'm going to tell your story. I'm going to write it down so that my kids can tell your story. That's who's going to tell your story. My kids. My kids will tell Jenny Reader's story.
Perfect.
My kids
Perfect.
love you. So
Oh, I love your
they
kids.
adore you. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh, thank you, Jenny, for your wisdom. And thank you, Jenny, for paying the price to know the stories of Jerusha, Mary, and Mercy, three indomitable women of church history. And thank you to those of you who are listening. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Unnamed Women of the Doctrine and Covenants. It's going to be such a great year because there's still many more women to come. Unnamed Women of the Doctrine and Covenants is a special bonus series from the Sunday on Monday podcast, and you can find it wherever you get podcasts on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and more on the LDS Living podcast feed. So go follow us for so many more women this year. The Sunday on Monday study group is a Deseret Bookshelf Plus original brought to you by LDS Living. It's written and hosted by me, Tammy Uzelak Hall, and today our incredible study group participant and leader of our discussion was Jenny Reader. Our podcast is produced by Cole Wissinger and me. It is edited and mixed by Cole Wissinger, and our executive producer is Aaron Hallstrom. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next week, and please remember, you are God's favorite. He took us into his secret library.
Oh my gosh.
It was okay, we don't have time now, but I will tell you, it was such a cool experience, and I'm so glad you talked us into it, because Jim's still talking about it.
Jim knows to listen to me.